In his earliest appearances, Ulysses Bloodstone was consistently portrayed as a stand-up, if stoic guy who kills evil monsters that threaten humanity. Then, not long after his daughter Elsa was introduced, we're told he was quite abusive in training her in the art of monster hunting. If you don't like this retcon, at least 2 handbooks mention the Next Wave team's memories were altered by the Beyond Corporation, later confirmed in Captain America and the Mighty Avengers. This was likely to account for the many inconsistencies in Elsa Bloodstone's backstory in the Bloodstone miniseries and what we were later told starting with Next Wave. But with how vague this is, we can also take it to mean Ulysses wasn't as awful as Elsa remembers. Those are false memories. But what about Cullen Bloodstone, Elsa's brother? On Cullen's 10th birthday, his father took him to an alternate dimension for an intense camping trip. He said, "I'm going to leave you here for a few hours, I'll be right back." Then Ulysses died, accidentally leaving Cullen stranded for 2 years. That's pretty messed up, and I can't explain it away with Elsa's memory implants. But we don't know how much Cullen wanted to get involved in his father's work. He seems nervous here, but he admits even after 2 years of being stranded in hell, this was pretty cool at first. This seems like something Batman would do. You want to patrol with me, eventually you're going to have to take a test in the real world. It's harsh, but the kind of work these guys do is harsh, and these men need to know their partners are ready for it. Not to mention, the Bloodstone on Ulysses' chest is sentient and manipulated him for thousands of years. While we have no confirmation of this, maybe the Bloodstone was working on Ulysses' mind and wanted him to get rid of any familial attachments that might get in the way of its plans. Same for Ulysses' first daughter, Lyra. Ulysses sacrificed her shortly after he got the Bloodstone to defeat a mystical warlord. The Bloodstone likely saw a warlord with a large following and magical powers as a threat to its own plans for Earth and wanted that taken care of. I won't tell you Ulysses' Bloodstone was flawless, could do no wrong. He was a man of singular vision, some would say obsessed. He likely pushed his children in their training, but as the Bloodstone made him think the fate of the world was at stake, he can be forgiven if he was a little strict, though I doubt he made a talking Iron Maiden hug his children if they guessed the name of a monster incorrectly. But as nobody else seems interested in clearing the good name of this man who died a hero, I'll say a lot of what we've been told in the last quarter century, maybe it's not the whole truth. Or maybe someone will add to the lore and say Ulysses knew exactly what he was doing and the Bloodstone had nothing to do with his decisions in raising his children. I imagine the reason so many creators in the last 20 years or so have felt okay in throwing Bloodstone under the bus is, in terms of importance in the rest of the Marvel Universe, he's pretty low on the hierarchy. So they probably think, he's been dead for almost 50 years. It's okay if we say he was abusive to his children. Nobody else is doing anything with him, especially if this means we can have interesting characters to play with now, with complex tragedies in their backstories. Characters are allowed to be flawed. That makes them interesting to read. Reed Richards sometimes tends to neglect his family in pursuit of his science. Green Arrow is a little bit of a philanderer. Giving them some flaws is fine, but there's a threshold you can cross which makes a character go from interesting, complex protagonist to straight-up unlikable villain. Child abuse like this, while perhaps amusing in its over-the-top cartoonishness, perhaps it crosses that threshold where we no longer like this guy. And for most people who are only familiar with Ulysses Bloodstone as a minor footnote in Marvel's history, or as a piece of backstory for characters they find more interesting, maybe it's okay for them that he was such a terrible father. But for me, I've read all the old Bloodstone appearances from the 1970s. I was gutted as I got to the end and knew that was it. No more adventures for me to ravenously consume. So for me, and maybe for anyone else out there who actually likes Ulysses as a character and not a piece of backstory to torture other characters, you have my suggestion of how to reconcile what we've been told without throwing Bloodstone under the bus too much. At least, that is what I'll be loading in my headcanon the next time I read Next Wave or this Death of Doctor Strange special. I hope you liked this one, and if you did, stick around. I do other kinds of videos. You might like something else I do in the future.